In the animated series Invincible, the subject of masculinity isn't dealt with overtly, yet it's a key underlying theme, even if not explicitly discussed. Yeah, masculinity is a general word, but quite frankly, who cares? Most people have pretty much the same idea in their head when they think of masculinity. Among the most emblematic figures symbolizing traditional notions of masculinity are Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Bruce Lee. It's undeniable that these men are absolute legends. Films, culture, and society have made them the ultimate tough guys, and have positioned them as role models for what it means to be a man. These three possess some essential characteristics linked with courage: discipline, boldness, ambition, a well-developed physique, unbreakable will, and unflinching dedication to their beliefs. A prime example of these characteristics in Invincible is Nolan Grayson, otherwise referred to as Omni-Man. Analyzing the name itself reveals the kind of individual he is. Omni signifies all-powerful, or always present, and man requires no explanation. Combined, Omni-Man connotes the absolute, unblemished ideal of male perfection, a faultless warrior with unwavering will, drive, and unyielding devotion to his causes. But here's the twist. If you watch the events that unfold in the first season of Invincible, you'll notice the writers deconstruct his Omni-Man character. And no, I don't mean his vicious deeds or the devastation that he leaves on Earth. His betrayal of the Viltrum Empire marks the actual turning point. It's apparent that throughout his brutal battle with his son, Mark, Nolan regrets and hesitates. His previously unbreakable will and allegiance to the Empire begin to waver. This is affirmed when, rather than killing Mark, he breaks his mission and leaves the planet. A betrayal against the same values on which he had based his whole existence. Nolan finds himself in crisis. He cannot go back to Earth as he's considered a criminal, yet he's broken on the inside too because everything he had committed his life to turned out to be a deception. In his greatest moment, his greatest test, his will failed. He could not sacrifice his family for the sake of the Empire. He acted against his own morals, falling prey to a love that discredits his race. Though deep inside, Nolan did care for his wife and his son, he could not fully display his fatherly affection for Mark. We can witness this in the special issue with Adam Eve, as Nolan responds negatively to the childish behavior of his son, such as when he teases himself as Duct Tape Man. At this point, he even thinks about killing his son and wife, but stops. He covers his face with his hand, recognizing the beast that he had turned into. In a typical patriarchal household, the head of the house is the father. He's the one who takes care of the family, yet, owing to his duties, he never gets enough time for his children as his job eats away all his time. But this isn't the case with Nolan. He isn't an average father, not only because of his superpowers, but because his duties are far greater. He's a superhero. It's him who saves lives, who provides people with hope. Placing yourself in his position, the responsibility becomes too much. This is a dilemma faced by Spider-Man as well. Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, will always struggle between his personal life and his work as a hero. But in the majority of the comic books and films, Peter will end up being a hero and sacrifice his personal well-being in the process. Another individual who represents this conflict is the revolutionary Che Guevara, who left his children and wife behind to go on his revolutionary mission in Bolivia, where his life came to a tragic end. But the fact that Nolan left Earth did not finish his mission, and betrayed the Viltrum Empire goes against the conventional notions of courage, dedication, and allegiance to one's ideals. Nolan never took the typical route of blind devotion to a system. He chose himself. He chose his own way. And in a lot of respects, the decision necessitated more courage than the conventional route. For what's the use in battling for the ideal if you can't enjoy it? What's the use in maintaining a belief if all it does is bring you and your friends and family only sorrow? When Nolan escaped Earth, he had become a broken individual, a devastated and disoriented soul, even considering suicidal thoughts by being consumed by a black hole. But later on, we find that he assists the Thraxans and develops a purpose in life through self-introspection and love. Although Nolan is an interesting character who breaks down conventional notions of masculinity, a more intriguing character still exists. My favorite character in the entire animated series is probably Cecil. Unlike the classic yet kind-hearted giant Omni-Man and the more childish Mark, whom we'll discuss later, Cecil is pragmatic, tough, and rational. He is willing to make moral compromises and will stop at nothing to protect what matters most. His famous quote, "We can be the good guys, or we can be the guys that save the world. We can't be both." At first glance, Cecil might seem like just another classic courageous character, with the only difference being his ideals and goals. But, as they say, the devil is in the details. While the typical hero adheres to strict moral principles, even when they threaten his mission, Cecil is different. He's willing to sacrifice the idea of heroism for the sake of achieving results. His quote reveals his worldview. He doesn't believe one can be both good in the traditional sense and still save the world. This makes him more than just a pragmatist. It positions him as a kind of anti-hero, one who acts for the greater good, even if his methods are viewed as ruthless. Characters like Cecil always balance on the fine line between hero and villain, which makes them incredibly intriguing and complex. What sets him apart from the typical courageous hero is his ability to shift his principles, not only in saving the world, but also in protecting those closest to him. Beyond his changing ideals, Cecil doesn't possess the traditional physical traits of masculinity. Quite the opposite. Most masculine characters emphasize their strength through physical superiority, combat skills, or charismatic leadership. Cecil, however, derives his power not from brute strength, but from intelligence, strategy, and influence. He doesn't need to perform grand acts of heroism to prove his strength. The classic masculine hero follows a strict moral code, whether it's never kill or always protect the weak. Cecil, on the other hand, believes that sometimes sacrifices must be made to save more people. This places him in a moral gray area. He's not just a good leader, but a strategist who makes the difficult choices others refuse to. A typical hero strives to inspire others, to be a symbol of hope. Cecil, however, understands that heroism often conflicts with real efficiency. He doesn't seek recognition or glory. He doesn't care if he's seen as a hero or a villain. His only priority is ensuring the world's safety. Whereas most masculine heroes struggle between doing what is morally right and making the logical choice, Cecil has already settled this debate for himself. He is willing to make decisions that others would find horrifying. His quote, "We can be the good guys, or we can be the guys that save the world. We can't be both," perfectly encapsulates his mindset. Masculine characters are often driven by ambition. They want to be the strongest, the most powerful, the most famous. They seek dominance, power, or legacy. But Cecil is different. He doesn't seek fame. He doesn't care if his name is remembered. He doesn't crave power for the sake of power, only for the results it can achieve. If he knew the world would be safe without him, he would leave without hesitation. Cecil is a character who not only defies the principles of classical courage, but also fails to meet society's expectations. Even the new iteration of the Guardians of the Globe fell apart due to Mark's accusations against Cecil. But instead of panicking, trying to make amends, or attempting to rebuild the old team, Cecil simply orders a new roster to be assembled. Pragmatic, efficient, and cold. People don't like individuals like him, but they fear them. Looking at real-life sociology, we often see that society, and women in particular, dictate what a man should be. They set conflicting expectations. A man should be strong yet gentle, firm yet understanding, dominant yet compromising. This contradiction persists, causing many men to suffer from burnout due to constant pressure. This paradox destroys lives. Many men, in their efforts to meet these contradictory demands, end up playing the role of a strong, independent leader, while simultaneously suppressing their vulnerabilities, worries, and doubts. This can lead to burnout, chronic stress, and even depression. When a person is expected to embody two conflicting ideals, it inevitably takes a toll on their mental and emotional well-being. Men, trying to fulfill both societal and personal expectations, such as those of women, often find themselves unable to be their true selves. They suppress their genuine emotions out of fear of appearing weak or failing to meet masculine ideals. This internal conflict breeds frustration and self-doubt. Society, in its push for an idealized version of masculinity, often overlooks the fact that such standards are not only unrealistic, but also harmful. Men who fall into these traps begin to question their own worth, leading to a decline in self-esteem, loss of purpose, and a mindset of merely surviving rather than truly living. The culture of toughness also discourages men from openly expressing their emotions or seeking help. This leads to social isolation, feelings of loneliness, and a lack of support, which in turn worsens psychological struggles. And this brings us smoothly to the next character. Conquest is the very definition of toxic, raw masculinity. Different from Nolan, Conquest isn't the kind who yearns for redemption or wants to express affection. He's the absolute embodiment of what his name symbolizes, conquest. He seems, on the surface, the archetypal classic man, steadfast in temperament, physically dominating, a warrior with monumental success, and a figure who inspires both fear and respect. Yet, as I have already indicated when speaking of the culture of brutality, Conquest is at heart a deeply unhappy individual. Even he concedes that he's lonely, lacking true companionship, and conscious that he's a monster. Conquest inspires fear and commands respect, but is a martyr as well. Only not in the classic sense. Not one who suffers for righteousness, but one who suffers because of it. Not only does Conquest relish battle, he's unable to function otherwise. War is all he knows, all that exists for him, and all which is expected of him. He's little more than a component in the callous imperial war machine, built for perpetual conquest. On this score, he's even more tragic than Omni-Man. While Nolan learns over time that it's possible to exist another way, Conquest's vision extends no further than battle. He's old now, he's endured countless wars, his body's been pitted by combat, but he's never given the chance to rest. The Viltrumites won't allow it. Won't allow him to die peacefully because he's still a weapon. He looks like an old general who's lived his lifetime on the battlefield, and knows that if it weren't for war, then he would be no one. He knows his own loneliness but is unable to stop it. And when he utters the words, "I'm so lonely," it's not a tossed-off line, it's a confession. He's devoted his whole life to power and achieved absolutely nothing but fear and hatred. He's a monster, and he knows it. He's used to being feared. He's used to being honored as a warrior. He's never been loved. He's never had a friend. Even among the Viltrumites, he doesn't have true companions, only calculating partners. In contrast to Mark, who wars for the people he cares about, Conquest wars for the sake of the fight itself. He has no one to defend because all his existence has been a destruction. He is the greatest symbol of what people think the perfect man should be. One expects strength inevitably to be the prelude to liberty. One becomes the more free, the more strong. But in the case of Conquest, his strength holds him captive. He's too essential as a soldier to be given a life outside the battlefield. Viltrumites won't allow him to die on his own terms. He won't be able to go away and say, "I've done enough." He will fight till his dying breath because that's all the kind of death that's being allowed for him. And when he beats him at last, Conquest smiles. He dies as he had long wished, in combat with honor. But that's the tragedy. He didn't want to survive. He doesn't die because he's been defeated. He dies because it's the only way out. For him, failure is not death. Rather, death itself is a liberation. And Conquest isn't the only one who thinks so. There are a lot of men with this attitude in today's world as well, who perceive death as the only escape from their ceaseless frustrations. That's the reason Conquest struck so close to the hearts of people after Episode 8, Season 3. In the animated series, his character developed a richness that the comics lacked. It made his agony and his philosophy more real, more heartbreaking. If Conquest embodies unrelenting, unbound power, then Nolan must be the shattered warrior who attempted to break free from this pattern, only to find it already too late. And Cecil, he's the calculating tactician who operates outside the bounds of conventional morality. But suppose you were offered a choice at the very start. Mark was not born with a predestined fate such as Conquest. He didn't exist for centuries under a strict system such as Nolan. He can create his own destiny. But the issue is, that destiny isn't defined. If the series already presented us with 3 models of masculinity, each culminating in suffering, then it challenges us with a brutal question. Is it possible to be strong and not become a monster? Mark treads a fine line between the two extremes. He wishes to be a hero, but not a cruel one. He wishes to be strong, but not a destroyer. Is it possible, though? Does power always require the cost of sacrifice? With Mark, the series raises its final question concerning what it means to be masculine. Can one be both genuinely kind and genuinely strong, and not have a horrible cost? Mark is intentionally designed so that the audience can relate to him. I still vividly remember watching the first season's opening episode when Debbie walked in on Mark as he sat on the toilet, reading a magazine, only for him to protest that he wasn't a little kid anymore. At that moment, I saw myself. It's no secret that Invincible's target audience is mostly teenagers aged 15 to 20. And even small everyday moments like that reflect things we all go through. Teenagers, like Mark, are trying to figure out who they are, what's right, what's wrong, and how to navigate the expectations placed on them. And like any teenager, Mark is constantly pulled in different directions. On one hand, society tells him who he should be: strong, confident, successful. His admiration for his father, his desire to follow in his footsteps, is even endearing. On the other hand, Mark still doesn't fully understand who he is. He wants to be a hero like his father, but he doesn't yet grasp what that truly means. He dreams of greatness, but soon realizes that power isn't just a privilege, it's a burden, and sometimes a curse. If Conquest is strength without doubt, and Nolan is strength weighed down by its consequences, then Mark is strength searching for its meaning. He endures pain, defeat, and betrayal. Yet, unlike Conquest, he has the option to pause, step back, and ask himself, do I even want to become like them? Because he isn't chained to the Viltrumite Empire. One of the most powerful moments in the series is the climax of Season 1, when Nolan beats his son, trying to force him into accepting the Viltrumite way. At that moment, Mark is literally being torn between 2 different versions of masculinity. One that demands that he prove his strength at any cost, and one that refuses to abandon his humanity. And when, broken and bleeding, he tells his father, "I still have you, Dad," he makes his choice. But the question lingers. Can he truly break free from this cycle? Because no matter what he chooses, he is a Viltrumite. And deep down, a part of him fears that one day he might become just like his father. That fear defines him. Mark is masculinity in transition, still forming, still evolving. He embodies the struggle between what others expect of him and what he wants for himself. And that's why he resonates so deeply with the audience. Because who hasn't at some point asked themselves, who am I? How can I be strong without losing myself? This is why the deconstruction of traditional masculinity through Conquest and Nolan is so important. Because after them, only Mark remains. He's the one left to redefine what masculinity can be. We see this shift in the real world too. The old masculine professions, jobs that were once respected, are being replaced by new ones, often more profitable, but dismissed by older generations as worthless or a waste of time. At the same time, women now enter traditionally male-dominated fields, only to face criticism and resistance. When it comes to morality, people tend to fall into three categories. The heroes, those who try to do everything right, never lie, never cheat, never swear, never drink. The villains, those who know right from wrong but choose personal gain over morality, stepping on others to succeed. The ones in between, those who sometimes fall into both categories but genuinely feel remorse when they do. But today, things are different. Just 100 years ago, prostitution was considered a disgrace. Now many women brand themselves as independent influencers, monetizing their personal appeal online. The question has shifted from, is this good or bad, to, why do you assume this is bad? I'm not hurting anyone. This shift, however, comes at a psychological cost. When people feel like they must constantly balance conflicting roles, it leads to stress, burnout, and anxiety. Society demands that men be strong and successful, but not too successful, lest they come off as arrogant. They must be tough, but also emotionally open, just not too vulnerable. This contradiction creates internal turmoil, and many, especially men, struggle in silence, unable to express their emotions or seek help. The myth that a man must always be strong and composed is deeply damaging, breaking people down from the inside. Mark's journey in Invincible reflects this dilemma. He isn't a perfect hero. He makes mistakes, doubts himself, and struggles to define his own moral path. He's not someone who has all the answers, but someone who keeps searching for them. And that's what makes him human, real. In a world where traditional standards are constantly being questioned, perhaps being a hero isn't the most important thing anymore. Maybe what truly matters is being honest with yourself and continuing to ask the questions that matter. Mark redefines courage. He challenges the notion that men must devote themselves entirely to an ideal or a mission. He allows himself to seek help, to make mistakes, to rely on others. Mark isn't the kind of character who will bear his burdens alone out of pride. Instead, he shares them with those he trusts, allowing himself to feel, to break down, even to seem pathetic in the eyes of the so-called real men. And there is another character who followed a similar path. Rex was rude, brash, sarcastic, immature, cocky, arrogant, argumentative, and harsh, especially toward his teammates and supposed friends. He had a habit of making crude jokes at their expense, showing little regard for how his words affected others. His sharp tongue and abrasive attitude often came across as outright hostility, regardless of the status or reputation of those he interacted with. Because of his relentless sarcasm and deep distrust of others, he wasn't exactly well liked within the superhero community. But there was a reason for his behavior. His difficult past shaped him into the person he became. As Invincible progressed, fans began to appreciate Rex more with each season. Beneath the layers of arrogance and immaturity, a deeper, more complex character started to emerge. As he embarked on his redemption arc, audiences saw a different side of him. A man trying to change, to be better. Rex is a prime example of someone who initially embodied the toxic ideals of traditional masculinity. He masked his insecurities with bravado, his pain with sarcasm, and his loneliness with arrogance. His behavior often irritated those around him, but it wasn't born out of malice. It was survival. Rex was not raised in a loving, supportive home. His family didn't nurture him or teach him right from wrong. Instead, they sold him to an organization that experimented on him, granting him his superpowers. Simply put, Rex raised himself. Without proper guidance, he struggled to understand the nuances of social interaction. What was appropriate, what was harmful, what was good or bad. While he could be insufferable at times, there were also moments when he showed surprising kindness, proving that he had the capacity to be more than just a toxic loudmouth. Perhaps, like many other young heroes, he grew up idolizing the idea of courage, watching fearless heroes save the world and wanting to be just like them. But what he thought was strength was actually just a defense mechanism. His near-death experience at the hands of Lizard King was a turning point. Facing his own mortality forced him to reflect on his life. He regretted the way he had treated people, realizing how much damage he had done, not just with his fists, but with his words. From that moment, he started to change. While he remained short-tempered and full of energy, his arrogance softened. He became more thoughtful, more respectful, more aware of those around him. His growth allowed him to find happiness in the simple things: cooking, companionship, and the warmth of human connection. But even as he found pieces of happiness, he was still haunted by his identity. When Ray chose to leave the superhero life behind, realizing that Cecil saw them as nothing more than expendable soldiers, she wanted Rex to come with her. She feared losing him, just as she had lost so much already. But Rex couldn't walk away. Being a hero wasn't just a job for him, it was his entire being. Without Rex Splode, who was he? If he abandoned his alter ego, if he stepped away from the life of a superhero, then what would be left? He had always dreamed of a normal life, of something quieter, something safer. But the thought of actually choosing that life terrified him. By season 3, we see him evolve even further. He becomes a pillar of support for his friends, helping Unbreakable and Adam Eve, standing by Ray even as they navigate their shifting relationship. There is even the spark of something deeper between them, and just as Rex finally completes his redemption arc, just as he begins to embrace an ordinary life, to step away from the reckless bravado and self-destructive cycle that defined him, he makes the ultimate sacrifice. He dies. But in doing so, he proves the kind of man he had become. Rex's story is a powerful reminder that true courage isn't about never making mistakes. It's about acknowledging them, learning from them, and making amends. His journey shows that strength isn't about playing the role that society forces upon you, but about choosing your own path, even when it's difficult. Ultimately, Rex's story is about breaking free from imposed expectations. It's about realizing that we don't have to follow the ideals that others set for us. Because real strength comes from being yourself, flaws and all. William is a character who challenges traditional stereotypes about masculinity and the way society perceives gay men. He doesn't fit the outdated caricature of the weak or overly effeminate gay character, often seen in older media. Instead, he embodies confidence, inner strength, and remarkable composure, qualities that even the toughest individuals might struggle to maintain in extreme situations. One of the greatest demonstrations of William's resilience is his scene with Omni-Man. Standing before a godlike being who has just slaughtered dozens in mere seconds, William doesn't crumble. He doesn't beg, flatter, or try to save himself through submission. Instead, he keeps his head held high, maintaining his dignity and even finding the strength to crack a joke. That is true masculinity, the ability to remain composed in the face of overwhelming danger, regardless of physical strength or status. In this sense, William is reminiscent of Omar Little from The Wire, another character who defies expectations of what a gay man should be. Omar, a street legend and terror to drug dealers, lives by his own code, showing no fear and making no excuses for who he is. He embodies hypermasculinity while remaining openly gay, proving that masculinity is not about brute force or aggression, but about inner strength, integrity, and staying true to one's principles. Characters like William challenge the idea that masculinity is defined by sexual orientation, appearance, or stereotypical behaviors. Instead, they show that it is demonstrated through actions, through perseverance in the face of hardship, the ability to stand firm under pressure, and the courage to remain oneself even in difficult circumstances. Throughout Invincible, William remains one of Mark's most steadfast friends. Unlike many others, he isn't afraid to be completely honest with him, even when the truth is harsh. He doesn't treat Mark differently because of his superhero status, nor does he idolize or flatter him. Instead, he demands accountability, pushes him to think critically about his choices, and ultimately helps Mark grow into a better person. William serves as a grounding force, reminding Mark that there's a world beyond his superhuman battles, a world where emotions, relationships, and personal integrity matter just as much as strength. Another crucial aspect of William's character is his emotional openness. Unlike the traditional idea that masculinity requires suppressing emotions, William is unafraid to express his feelings. His vulnerability, especially in his relationship with Rick and in his struggle to cope with loss, is what makes him truly courageous. Throughout Invincible, William remains one of Mark's most steadfast friends. Unlike many others, he isn't afraid to be completely honest with him, even when the truth is harsh. He doesn't treat Mark differently because of his superhero status, nor does he idolize or flatter him. Instead, he demands accountability, pushes him to think critically about his choices, and ultimately helps Mark grow into a better person. William serves as a grounding force, reminding Mark that there's a world beyond his superhuman battles, a world where emotions, relationships, and personal integrity matter just as much as strength. Another crucial aspect of William's character is his emotional openness. Unlike the traditional idea that masculinity requires suppressing emotions, William is unafraid to express his feelings. His vulnerability, especially in his relationship with Rick and in his struggle to cope with loss, is what makes him truly courageous. William subtly dismantles the outdated idea that masculinity and homosexuality are somehow incompatible. His life is not defined by his romantic relationships, but he also doesn't close himself off from love. He is deeply committed to his boyfriend, but maintains his own ambitions, interests, and worldview outside of that relationship. In many ways, William is one of the most self-assured characters in Invincible, and truthfully, more confident than many real people. Through William, Invincible does more than just present another supporting character. It challenges outdated notions of what it means to be a man. He proves that masculinity isn't about aggression, suppression, or conforming to rigid social expectations. Instead, it's about self-confidence, emotional openness, and the courage to be yourself, even in a world that may not always be accepting.